All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sensitive Podcast. I am your host, Kim Kimball, somatic leadership coach for highly sensitive and neurodivergent women in business. I have such an exciting episode today. I'm here with Lauren. We are going to talk about ethical copywriting and finding your authentic voice. I can't wait to dive in, but first, I'm going to allow her to introduce herself.
All right. I'm Lauren Van Mullem, and you can find me at truerwordsbylauren.com. And I'm an ethical copywriter for coaches and healers and a lot of therapists, sometimes the odd tarot reader. I love what I do.
I love that. Yes. And I actually have never heard the story of how you got into copywriting. And I always am so intrigued at how people land and what they do. So if you are willing to share, I would love to hear how you landed in this career.
So I'm one of those millennials that graduated in the middle of the recession. So there were no jobs. And I found a really, really terrible job working for the city of LA. I am totally going to like name call. Um, but it that office job was so toxic and um, kind of trauma inducing. I won't say kind of. I had nightmares of it 3 years after I quit, but
Mm.
it made me want to create my own job because what was out there was not what I needed, not what I wanted. So as I was phasing out of that one, like I was being responsible, I paid off my student loans because I think I was like the last generation that could do that. Um, and I got out of there and I traveled and I came back and I had started writing content, just little blog posts for business owners. And it was like $8 for a blog post. Like that was my rate in those days because I didn't know anybody who was doing that. I didn't know anybody to ask what should I charge. So I charged ridiculous things. And I built up a lot of clients and 9 years later, I had, made a name for myself in software as a service as a thought leadership ghost writer. So you have some bigwig in tech or the leader of a startup, and he's got some bright ideas. It's usually, sorry, sometimes ladies. But they needed content that was fresh and that showed their perspective. And I was really good at doing that and putting myself in the character of that person. So ghostwriting came really easily to me. But then I got so buried under the tech jargon because it's a very jargon laden industry that started to eat at me. And then I just couldn't give a crap about another app. That started to eat at me. I got super burnt out and I quit everything. I'm like, I'm going to make hats. I'm going to paint. I will find another career that is creative and fulfilling. And that lasted for 2 whole weeks. And then I got an email from a coach who said, I've been wanting to work with you for such a long time. I know you're not taking clients right now, but would you please? And they were delightful and wonderful. And so was the next one and the next one. And I finally just changed my niche to coaches and teachers and healers and like woo-woo folks who have crystals on their desk who are like doused in essential oils. And I love them so much. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wow, what a journey. I'm so grateful to be able to hear that. And a couple of things stood out for me. Number one was this, okay, what I want doesn't exist, so I'm going to have to create it. And I am pulling that out and naming that because I think that is such a common experience for folks who are highly sensitive and neurodivergent because our sensitivities, our sensory needs, our need for rest and more downtime is I'm not going to say it doesn't exist in corporate or in the larger world because, that's a strong statement, but it's really hard to find, right? And so really out of necessity, a lot of the times folks will end up in this place where they're like, look, like in order to not just survive and sort of feel like I'm going through a slog just to get through my career every single day to provide for myself financially. If I want to actually move to thriving, in other words, I've got to create the thing myself.
Yes.
And so I just wanted to name that because I think that's such a common experience for folks, like I said, that are highly sensitive and neurodivergent. So good on you for doing that. And then just this journey, even from there, that I love that you painted a full picture of like, you didn't just land in the niche that you're in right now, that it was a journey, that it's kind of like, oh, this feels good, but this doesn't, and maybe a little bit of a quarter turn. And I think that's important to name for folks as well, because I think we all get to those places if we're in business enough where we're like, ooh, this doesn't necessarily feel super aligned anymore. And there can be lots of fear that comes up with that of, I'm going to burn this all down. And maybe it's been financially successful up until this point, and then what, right? Um, but really seeing how these opportunities sort of naturally unfolded for you and that you've landed in a place that feels good for you now is super encouraging.
I love that reflection, um, because you made me think of, oh yeah, I did spend that entire time in that office feeling absolutely exhausted and looking around and wondering why everybody else wasn't the same way. I thought there's something wrong with me, like I must be super weak. And that wasn't true. It just wasn't the way I needed to work.
Yeah. And it's funny that you named that. I was actually just having a coaching exchange with someone about that today of it's so frequent that people who are highly sensitive or neurodivergent blame themselves rather than the environment or something not being a fit. And I know for myself in my career, I don't know if you know this, Lauren, but I was a doctor of physical therapy for 13 years before I switched into being a somatic coach. And I spent at least 7 years of that time thinking something was wrong with me because I didn't love it. And I had a doctorate level education to get there. And there was lots of loans that, unlike you, I feel like I will never pay off in my entire life. So good on you for that one too. But it took me kind of exhausting every possible option of recognizing, okay, I'm going to try to change this in order to see if I can be content in my career. And I'm going to try to change this and I'm going to try to change this. And it was only by exhausting all of that that I could really get to the place of acceptance of, okay, I think this just isn't a fit. And it took me 7 years, folks. Like, and that's because of all of this, the the internalized shame that neurodivergent people experience of, well, there's got to be something wrong with me, keeps you from questioning the systems that you're in, and it just makes you blame yourself. So
I
yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about ethical copywriting. What does that mean to you to be an ethical copywriter, and why is it important to you?
So my definition of ethical copy, um, it can be as simple as don't manipulate people, but what it really is giving the prospective client all the information they need to make the best decision for them in their own best time. So we're not trying to say, like, this is the best decision for you. We're letting them decide for themselves and giving them everything they need to do that instead of holding things back, trying to talk them into something, reserving the price and other pertinent details for a sales call. With this, you don't have to do any of that because it's so uncomfortable for us as the entrepreneurs to try to talk somebody into something and maybe talk them into something that they can't comfortably afford. That's not a good place to be for anybody. So, ethical copywriting is just here's the information, and I trust you to make the decision like an adult.
For those who are not on a video podcast, if you're on the audio version, I'm clapping over here. Um, it's so funny. I was having this conversation this morning as well, but it truly is allowing the person who is inquiring about your services, viewing them as a responsible, whole, and capable human being that is capable of making the decisions that are best for them. And in unethical copywriting, marketing, all of the things, it really is this weirdly contemptuous relationship where you are being manipulative, where you are honestly, and I mean, people aren't consciously doing this a lot of times, I think. I think it's a lot of time unconscious, but it's unconsciously thinking that you know better than that person about their own life and their own needs. And when we name that, I hope just like allow that to land how messed up that is. Like that I know better than you about your life and about what you need and about your finances. And if you're telling me that you can't afford it, I think there's some weird ulterior motive where actually you can. Like, no, I'm just going to assume that if you're telling me that you can't afford it, that you have a better grasp on your finances than I do and that you really can't afford it. And if you're making up some lie to me, well, it's not my job to figure that out, right? So it's just there is so much less positioning and jockeying and mass and figuring things out, and it's just the way I like to describe it is this is what I have and this is what you need, and is it a fit without all of this manipulation and coercion and contemptuousness of I know better than you and I've got to convince and control and push you through a funnel and all of this stuff that honestly, when we are actually, and maybe this is the problem, this is actually coming up as we're talking. Maybe the problem is like, because I was about to say, when we're actually connected with ourselves, it doesn't feel good to do those things. But maybe part of the problem is that when we are taking on these unethical copywriting lenses, it really does require a certain level of disconnection from our humanity and from our bodies in order to do them.
It does. And it's an energetic thing where if you are sitting across from somebody and you are thinking, what can I get out of them? How can I make them do the thing that I want them to do? It comes across very differently and it puts them on the defensive as it should. But if you approach any conversation, and I include writing in this as well, writing is a conversation. If you come at this as, here's how I serve people, here's a need that I see you might have. How can I be of service to you? How can I help you? It's so different and it feels so much better.
Yeah.
So that's what I like to do in my copy. And of course, the tricky part is you have to be really clear in articulating what you do for people and why they might want it. And that's why people pay me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and maybe that's part of it too, Lauren, even as you're saying that, is that if we lean on these unethical measures, there maybe is perhaps a little bit less of a burden to be clear and articulate because you're just kind of forcing through the funnel or whatever it is that you want to say.
Or
Um,
charming people. You can
yeah.
charm people into doing a whole lot of things that they wouldn't do otherwise.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see coaches, healers, service-based entrepreneurs, I know the folks that you work with, make in their copywriting?
I think the first thing is, and this goes to foundations, it's not having a ton of clarity about who you want to work with. I was just having a conversation with this newer coach, and she has one of those modalities that you can use for literally anything. So her beginning niche statement was like, if you have any unwanted habit, and I'm like, oh my gosh, let me give you the list of things I wish I wasn't doing on a day-to-day basis. But it turned out what she really wanted to do was work with more compulsive habits like skin picking, and that's really specific. So, and a huge difference between the habits that bug me about myself in my day, which are not compulsive, they're just annoying, and what she really wants to do. So often, clarity can come from a conversation of, okay, your modality could do anything. but what do you love? And that typically cuts the noise. Sometimes they don't know that yet. Sometimes they haven't worked with enough kinds of people yet. And that's what I'm like, go experiment. See who you love working with, see who you do not love working with. Take notes because you want to know which way you're leaning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's such an amazing point as you were sharing that of, the lack of specificity, the lack of clarity of who you most want to work with. That is exactly what came to mind for me of I didn't know that for a while. It took working with a lot of folks to really whittle that down. And I think a lot of times people just want to make that process shorter than it can actually be. It takes coaching or, whatever your modality is, whether you're a therapist or, a coach, a service based, done for you, whatever, consultant, strategist. I always say that word wrong. Did I say it right?
So
I think so. My husband always corrects me on that one. And I'm like, something I just have like a mental block on is like how to say that word correctly. Whatever it is that you're doing, you got to do it with a lot of people a lot of times. And to really figure that out, and just want to say to people, like, nothing has gone wrong when that is the case. That's just normal part of developing your business. This is a normal part of it. So, yeah.
yeah, I worked with anybody who was willing to pay me for years. And the breadth of businesses that I've worked with, the breadth of industries, that experience, people don't get that now because there's so much more awareness of niching down so early. And yes, that's how you make money. Like, yes, you are going to make the big money or the bigger money when you do figure out what niche you want to work with. But the experience that you sacrifice if you niche too soon, nobody talks about.
Mm, I love that. And what would you say that it brought you, this breadth of experience that you're talking about?
It makes me an amazing teacher because I can take any piece of coffee from any industry, and I've probably worked with it at least 5 times before. So while I love my coaches and I, at last count, have worked with over 300 of them, I wasn't counting before that. And that was 9 years, 9 years of experience working with guys who sold giant inflatable water slides for yachts. Like that's probably the weirdest one, but there's such a wide range. And I can tackle anything now, and I can teach anything now, and I love teaching.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. It's such a powerful reminder. I appreciate you sharing that. I feel similarly. I feel like I could coach anyone on anything at any time. And I have zero qualms about that because I have and I do and I will. So, of course, like I outwardly market, I feel like I'm actually very niche and specific. But I am able to coach on anything. Like if if someone came to me that was outside of that outwardly facing niche and had some kind of a, whatever, a different challenge, there wouldn't be any anxiety that rose up in me that I wouldn't be able to do that. And I think that comes from lots of experimentation and just lots of coaching. Yeah, I don't even know how many people at this point, thousands of people probably. Um, so yeah, don't rush yourself through the process if you are listening to this and you're hearing this. I think those are really great reminders.
That said, don't spend 9 years.
True.
Nobody
Balance.
who will pay you either.
Balance. Absolutely. I love it. Well, I want to shift into talking about newsletters. I know you're passionate about writing newsletters people actually want to read. And so, what do you think the key elements of that for people to consider is?
So, sorry. I'm losing my voice because I taught for an hour before our call.
No worries. Take your time.
So, newsletters, when I approached teaching how to write newsletters, I did a lot of informal research of just looking at the survivors in my inbox because I unsubscribe from a lot. I have like an annual unsubscription fest every December. actually from November through December when all of the sales emails hit, and I just unsubscribe en masse. So anything that survives has something going on. And I made a system out of what I saw every email that survived have in common. They are personal. They have personal stories. They are talking in the first person. Like this is an individual that I care about, even if I've never met them. And they're sharing about their lives. Usually there's a nature photo, a cute kitty photo. Susanna Conway had an entire litter of foxes in her backyard and take the most amazing pictures. And I would open every single newsletter to see what the foxes were doing. It took me forever to figure out what she actually sold. But by then I was so engaged and charmed by her. I was like, sign me up for whatever. So those are the newsletters that I love. And that's what I teach people to write. But we also have to balance because most of us are not selling our newsletters. Substack has changed that game. Now we're subscribing just to read people's thoughts. But when we're doing newsletters for our business, it's more of a balance of here's personal story, here's what I'm doing, here's what's happening in my life, here's a picture of my cat and my chicken and my dog. And then here's a fun free gift. I love giving things away in my newsletter. It is just like I like to shower my people with presents. And here's the thing that I'm promoting now. And here's what I'm reading, bringing it back to the personal. Here's what I'm listening to, my favorite podcasts. I have featured you at least twice now.
I know. I'm so grateful.
Um, but it brings it back around to that. Here's who I am as a human. Here's what's on my nightstand. Here's what's in my ear.
I love that. The personal, the sharing of our lives, the talking in the first person, showering with gifts. And I am curious about something because I'm honestly still trying to form my views on this. And it's the reason I'm asking you this question. But um, I know a lot of people, especially like in the ethical copywriting space, believe in separating a email that is a values based email from a sales email and just making a sales email. This is purely a sales email. So in other words, in a values based email, you're not going to have at the end of it promoting an offering. People can very much believe in keeping those in two separate camps and having them be completely separate. What are your thoughts on that?
I've I've seen it work both ways. I don't think that there is an ethical sacrifice if you do two, both at the same time. I think sometimes it's really refreshing to, especially if you're launching something. I've been launching a series of workshops, and a lot of those emails are going to have my blend of here's the personal thing, here's the thing I'm promoting, here's the fun stuff, the candy at the end. Um, and then I'll do here's the final call. Here's, the thing that I'm selling is happening on Wednesday, and that's all that there is. So I don't think there's a hard rule to where you should separate it. You certainly can, and I think it would work really well. What I do believe in separating is the lead magnet, because often the freebie, I'm using air quotes, the air quoted freebie is not actually free because it's gated and it's asking for your email. So I don't love saying this is a free thing if I'm asking for something in return. So what I will do is say, here's my actually free freebie. If you find this valuable, sign up for my newsletter. Now I've switched it actually just today. I have my newsletter sign up and it's here, like, please sign up for my newsletter. I'd love to see you. And here's all the stuff I'm going to throw in. So it's giving incentive without gating the incentive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. I love that. I have not, I don't think I've ever had a quote unquote gated freebie. Um, it's always felt a bit off for me. And that's not me saying like, oh, you should never do that and it's wrong to do that. It's just, everybody has their things of what feels good to them and what doesn't. Just naming that that's never felt good for me. But yeah, I love that stance. I am someone that only writes 2 to 3 emails a month. And so a lot
Great.
of, yeah, so sometimes I feel like if I were to completely separate them, then I would be needing to write a lot more emails. And I'm just like never essentially promoting my offerings, which doesn't feel good either. So I might play a little bit with that. I like your take and stance and appreciate you sharing.
I am so sporadic in my emails unless I am launching something and then it's like every week. But other than that, it's maybe once a month and my open rates are very high.
Hmm. I love that. Hmm. Well, let's talk about the difference between benefits and features. I think this is something that has been kind of the biggest learning curve for me and my copywriting when I'm doing copywriting for myself. And I think that this is a big, big thing when people are doing their copy. So, how can you make sure you're speaking to the benefits of whatever you're offering and not just the features?
I'm going to give you the most millennial response ever because my favorite way to explain this is with Super Mario Brothers.
Oh, great. I love Super Mario.
Okay. So you got Mario, right? And I'm thinking back to like the original Nintendo where he's just like going across the screen horizontally and
Yeah.
there's no 3D. So when Mario is running across the screen, and I think anybody who's played this game, we have this muscle memory where we don't even have to think about it because the rhythm is embedded. It's hard coded in our brains. So you know exactly when to jump and exactly when to get the mushroom. And then after the mushroom, you get the firepower flower. These are features. The mushroom allows him to grow. The firepower flower allows him to knock out the Koopa Troopers. But why is he doing this? Because he doesn't want to necessarily be a larger Mario. He doesn't want to necessarily go through his life firepower flowering opposite Koopa Troopers. He's doing it for a reason, and the reason is to save the princess. So saving the princess is the benefit. The firepower flower is the modality. That's how you get there.
I love that explanation. That's so clear in my brain as somebody who spent a lot of hours playing Super Mario, specifically Super Mario 3. Man, loved that game. Do you remember the suit where you could, the bear suit that he would like put it on and become a statue? That
Yes.
was the best. Absolute best. And then there was the one where there was also like, was it another bear? The one with his tail where he could fly, it would like twirl around. Oh my gosh, I
Oh, I
could,
thought it was like a raccoon or something.
yes, I could geek out on this for a really long time. So I love that you use that. I love that you use that analogy. Um, that makes so much sense. And I think that it can be a bit disheartening, to be honest. At least I'm speaking to my own experience of, let's say, when you work with a copywriter and they point out the fact of like, okay, whatever first draft that I turned in, I'm actually speaking to just the features here. And then they kind of press you as they would and should of like, what are the actual benefits that we're selling here? And then it can like kind of lead you to this place of like, well, I don't know. And it can expose your own lack of clarity about your own offering, right? And then that can be this really disconcerting thing that you have to walk through. So I guess what I'm trying to name here is I think that as coaches, as healers, as all, like we can sort of hide behind the features, and not really get super deeply acquainted with the actual benefits of our offering. And that is something within our own process that we need to take some time with.
The easiest way I've found to get there when you find yourself with a list of features that you thought were benefits is asking yourself, so you can. So you've got this thing that you're helping them do so they can do what?
Yeah.
Like what is their princess? What are they trying to get to? But I think what makes this hard if you struggle with the so you can, I think it's probably going back to your client research because you don't know the answer And you don't know the answer because you don't have the answer. They have the answer.
Hmm. That's a great point. And what you think may be the answer is very different for what they actually are wanting it for. That's a very important point. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Well, how do you feel about using pain points in copy? I know this is something there's a widely varying opinions on as well. So I would love to hear what your take is.
Some of my clients hate, they absolutely hate pain points so much. They're like, it brings down the vibe of the page. They want high vibes only. The way I like to explain it is I want to meet the the reader with the energy that they're coming to the page with. Because if somebody comes to you, say you're meeting a friend at a coffee shop and you get there first, or you sit down with your latte and you're waiting for them. And if they come in frazzled, windblown, maybe the heel of their shoe has snapped off and their dog barfed on the floor before they left the house and they got a speeding ticket on the way and they couldn't find parking, you're going to meet them with a very different energy. You're going to be like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. Please sit, breathe, let me get you some tea. Like, that's the energy you're going to greet them with. If you greet that frazzled person who's had a very hard day with like false positivity, you're not going to be friends anymore. Like, that's really insensitive. So that's my approach to a sales page or a homepage, even when you're talking to where somebody is. If they are in a lot of pain, you can't ignore it because it's rude and it's weird, right? But you also don't want to make it feel worse. And that's where the traditional pain pointy intro goes off the rails and becomes manipulative, because it will take where you are right now, which is usually in a bad place if you're looking for help. And it will, what I call punching the bruise. It'll say, okay, here's how bad you feel now. Here's how much worse it could get. And that is so manipulative because it's trying to pump up the urgency to solve the problem by making it feel worse. It's twisting somebody's arm. So, what I do, I meet them where they are because we should. And then I try to lift them out of it with some hope as quickly as possible. And if they're in a very painful place, I do it even faster. I acknowledge, here's where you are. Here, I understand. And here's how we're going to get you out of this, because that's a terrible place to be. It's much more empathy driven than pain points.
Hmm. I love those distinctions so much because you're right. Like if somebody's coming to you and they're in a lot of pain, to ignore it is profoundly unkind and invalidating. It and that ability to meet the person where they are is really just letting them know, like, I understand, I see you, I hear you. It's allowing them to feel met. And especially if you are a therapist, a coach, a healer of some kind, like that's our whole job. And so why would we not do it in our copy, right? Um, so I think that's such an important distinction. But something else that came to my mind as you were sharing this is almost like I'm trying to think of the way to say this, but I know folks that a lot of times, for example, maybe they speak more to the pain points and then they end up having clients come in that are really seeped in pain or really inundated in their pain or their challenges in a way that they're not actually aligned with the type of help that the coach or therapist or healer or whoever is best fit to help. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to that distinction too of what I'm hearing is like, let's not invalidate people's pain. Let's meet them in it. Let's pull them out of it as soon as possible. Let's effectively meet them, say, I hear you, I see you. But then also, it's almost something like I'm thinking like doing it to the right level so you're not bringing in wrong fit clients, if that makes sense.
Yes, you want to reflect back the level of pain that you're prepared to actually handle.
Mm.
And you're going to do that in like the intro to your page so your people can recognize, oh, this person's talking about me. And then just as a final layer of protection to make sure that you're getting the right fit clients and not somebody who is too far past what you can do, I use a fit check at the end. And it's super simple. It's like, this is for you if, this might not be for you if. And then you are very explicit about, if you are having this degree of problem, if you are experiencing this symptom that is beyond the scope of the work that we're going to do, you probably need another resource. And if I can, I'd like to actually link to that other resource,
Mm,
which is totally against best practice, especially for a sales page. You're not supposed to link to anything but the buy button on a sales page. But that's when I would break that rule.
yeah, perfect. I love that. That helped me like, yeah, kind of put that whole framework together because like I said, as you were speaking, I was like, yes, yes, yes. And it felt like there was this other little caveat in there that I wanted to name. I love that. Well, I would love to shift into talking about finding your own authentic voice and your copy and in your business. So, I just want to name that this is something that has been very challenging for me personally. I know I shared with you before we connected on this podcast and sort of like the pre-recording stage of like I think and I've had people tell me that I can come off as very clinical when I'm writing in my copy and and when somebody tells me that, I'm like, well, yeah, of course, because I was a clinician for 13 years and I have a doctorate level education. And I personally, for me, I legitimately think that way when I write. Like this is a case of I don't feel like I'm being inauthentic. I feel like I genuinely have been trained to think that way when I write. And so people when they experience me and my energy, I think my who I am and my energy comes off very different, let's say in this podcast or in a conversation or in a coaching call with me than my writing. And so what tips do you have for helping somebody to find their authentic voice that's more like they're speaking, more like their authentic energy in their writing?
I have a few tips. And I'm really glad that you added context of like, this is just how your brain works when you are writing. Because the struggle to find your authentic writing voice can come from so many different places. Like some of us, like we should ourselves into sounding like something that we think we ought to sound like. Um, but that is in different yet somewhat related aspects. And I think that the tips that I've got would work for all of the things. So the goal is to write like we speak. And maybe leaving out all of the ums and the, you know, all of the little vocal tics that we tend to pick up. And we want our best NPR voice, ideally, like the NPR interviewee voice where you sound so like kind of polished and super smart. We want that voice. And I think the way I would start is to actually, because we have this technology now, oh my goodness, we can talk through an idea and record it and transcribe it immediately. That's where I would start. I would actually start by just talking. Just here's the blog post topic I want to tackle. Here are my thoughts about it. And just talk it through, transcribe, and see what that looks like. And then you want to clean it up because it will have all of the vocal tics that we tend to pick up and all of the imperfections that come out naturally as we speak. And a minor cleanup is going to get you pretty close. Now, an interesting thing that we have technology for also now, we can feed this through something like ChatGPT. We can ask it, what are the characteristics of this narrative voice, of this brand voice? And we can have it analyze basically what makes us us. And then with that level of knowledge, we can start thinking, oh, this is what I need to do when I'm writing. And that might give you a step in the right direction of how to actually just do that without these intermediate steps. That's where I would start. That's where I would experiment. I'd say the worst thing that we can do, and I see so many of my clients doing this now, is they go straight to Chat GPT, and that's not their voice at all. It's not their energy. It's not gonna deliver the vibe that's gonna create a perfect fit client on the other end. I mean, it's just such a bad idea.
Yeah, and I love that you're not throwing out ChatGPT at all. It's just thinking of using it more wisely for something that would actually be helpful instead of sort of getting, stuck with clients that aren't actually fit because it's not even your vibe, it's not your voice. Um, really helping you, really what I hear you saying is using this as a tool to help you learn more about your own voice, about your own vibe so that you can do that more intentionally and more kind of, maybe this isn't exactly the right phrase, but like on command, less thinking about it, less overthinking, less getting stuck in my case, like an academic voice and things like that.
Yeah, and you can even ask, like, how do I make this sound warmer, more personal, and less academic? And it will give you an analysis of how to do that. It's incredibly useful tool, and it does have so many ethical problems. So I use it, as you say, intentionally and limited. Just the sheer amount of water it takes to get those machines to do what they do is terrifying. And that's just like one of the issues. So I see so many of my clients using it, and I don't think I can consciously ignore it. I can't resist that this is where things are going, but I can think very carefully about how to use it for the best results as minimally as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful I talk about a third way. I'm a third way person through and through, but that hits me as kind of a third way thing to do. It's like I'm not going to fully endorse and stamp of approval of this because there's lots of ethical issues with it that I'm very concerned about, and also I'm not going to hide my head in the sand and kind of ignore and say, this isn't how things are going. Let's find the third way of how can we intentionally use this as sparingly as possible and have a positive impact with it. So I love that. Um, so staying on the theme of finding your authentic voice, I personally noticed in my interactions with you because I hired you, I did a Loom review of one of my copy pages, and I just was by the end of it, I mean, this was my first interaction with you, but I was like, "Oh my God, I love her." Like she's just phenomenal and fantastic. And can I be your friend? Um, because there were just like these little quirks that you like tied in your personality into my copy review in such a way that it made you so endearing to me and made me feel like I knew you while you were simultaneously obviously very professional, and I got so much out of it and there was tons of value for what I paid for. But I guess what I'm saying is that I noticed that not only do you infuse your authentic voice into your copy, but you infuse it into your business and into your services, that it just feels like you are able to be uniquely you in your business. And I wanted to know what your journey was like with that, of really allowing your authentic voice and personality to shine through in your business. And specifically, if that's come naturally to you or if that's something that you've had to work on.
Um, I hate to say this because I would love to I would love for it to be different. Um, I went in 6th grade. I asked my English teacher, who I'm still friends with, by the way. I asked her, "What is this? What is everybody talking about? Like trying to find their authentic voice?" And she's like, "Oh, honey, you don't ever need to worry about that.
You're
You
just
know what?
something that's
That's really
online for you.
Yeah." So it's actually been a struggle to learn how to teach. it
Mm.
because it's like a native speaker trying to teach their native language. There's so much that we don't even have to think about. So that has been the study, is how do I help other people to do this? And so much of it is just baked into my personality. Um, so much of it is, I don't know if you do Enneagram, but I am an Enneagram 8. And we are just, we give, I
Go
don't
ahead.
want to spoil
Go
a
ahead.
nice podcast.
No,
Hold on.
go ahead.
We give zero fucks.
Yeah.
And that is as nice and as lovely as I try to be and as kind. That is the core truth. And I think that level of confidence allows me to be really open about who I am and to make stupid jokes and not second guess myself. And I think that's really the art of it, is not being afraid of what other people will think. And that's a privilege. That doesn't happen for all of us. A lot of us are punished for things when we're very young, and we develop this fear logically to protect ourselves. What are other people thinking? Am I doing the wrong thing? Am I making a mistake? Did I say the wrong thing? Is somebody going to hate me? Are they going to, like, you know, shove me out of the village? And that's such a human fear. It's very hard to counteract. But I think if you can work on the belief that people generally are primed to want to like you, I think it helps. It's like a little baby step to putting yourself out there with less fear.
Mhm. I love that honest answer, Lauren, because there are certain things that people will ask me, like, I'm trying to think of, I'll I think the one that people often tell me is like, "How do you live with so much integrity?" Like, I'm somebody that will take really big risks and make really big leaps if something is not aligned with my values. Um, and, on pretty big stuff, like, I have quit my job during the middle of the pandemic because I wasn't aligned with how some things were handled, and um things like that, where some people are like, whoa, like, how did you, like, put yourself in this financially insecure situation? um and it's something, like you're saying, I've just never had to work at that. That's something that is baked into my personality. It's something, and I so relate with what you're saying of like, okay, now how do I teach that? Because it's something I haven't had to learn, right? It's something that is just sort of baked into my personality. And I think us acknowledging that for those things that do come naturally to us is really important. And that when we can get in touch with, how do I do this for ourselves so we can be of service to other people in that way, that it's also can be really healing both for ourselves and for other people. Because I don't know, there's something about understanding it for myself as well, instead of just kind of doing it on autopilot of like, oh, how is this possible for me? How do I do this? And for me, with the example that I shared, it's by putting more importance on my own values than on other people's. Um, and that's something that comes very naturally to me that doesn't come naturally at all to other people, So being able to break that down. But yeah, that's a long-winded way to say I appreciate your honesty and sharing, even though you said like, oh, I wish it was a different answer. I think it was a beautiful answer, and I'm so honestly just really grateful for you that you're able to experience that in natural flow, that it just flows out of you. And I'm very familiar and love the Enneagram. I am a 6 wing 7. I thought that I was a 7 at various points in my life when I was really like when I backpacked around the world by myself. I was like, I am totally a 7. And then in a lot of other areas of my life, I'm like, no, I'm definitely a 6. Which I
I
know I
really
think,
struggled to figure it out. And I thought I was a 7 for the longest time for similar reasons.
yeah. It's amazing how those wings are you a wing 7?
No, I'm a 8 wing 9.
Okay.
So I'm like the softer 8, if there is such a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. My sister is an 8, so I'm very familiar with 8s and awesome energy that you all bring. So,
Yeah, we're kind of brats. Like that's kind of the truest thing about an 8 is we're a brat.
well, I love it. I love the energy that you bring in. I want to ask, I do have a rapid fire after this question, but before we go into the rapid fire, I would love to ask how people can connect with you and learn more about your work, and if there's anything in particular that you want to share or promote right now. Want to give space for that before we go into the rapid fire.
Yes. Well, so a lot of my clients are leaving social media in droves. So if that is true for your people, then my newsletter is very purposely delightful. I want it to feel like a cozy, soft landing in your inbox because life is hard, the world is on fire, you need something cozy, and I can do that. I can do that in your inbox sporadically. I make no promises. Um, but right now, I've just finished probably the first incarnation of several. I've got a new sequence, a welcome sequence that is a starter kit for ethical marketing. So when you sign up for my newsletter, you get so many presents. Gift giving is my love language. And one of the presents is I'm going to walk you through the 3 most important things to do on every single page. And then because that's kind of like fun slash work, which is less fun, I throw some really fun things in that are just fun. Like, here's the episode from my podcast that I think is really fun to listen to. And here's a free template that you might find useful if you have 5 more minutes. Um, Here's a video of my favorite sales page that still brings tears to my eyes. So I really try to mix it up. There are a few cat photos. There's a chicken photo. It's very cozy.
I love it so much.
So for anybody who's still on social media, bless you. I still have optimism for these platforms. I am on Instagram and Blue Sky. Beautiful.
Mm, thank you so much. Well, are you okay to transition into a little bit of rapid fire, lighthearted questions in hopes of people getting to know you a little bit more?
Hit me.
All right. So the first is just, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing that feels like it needs another moment to wrap up from the podcast today?
Oh, I think my favorite reflection was actually like how far I've come from, being in my early 20s and figuring out everything and sort of doing the things I thought I was supposed to do and listening to everybody's advice. And then I think my career has been shedding all of those shoulds from other people and learning to listen to myself better.
Hmm. I noticed my body taking a big exhale when you talked about the shedding. What do you wish people knew about your experience as a highly sensitive or neurodivergent person in the world?
I know these are rapid fire, but
It's a big one.
it is. I think a lot of us have to do things hard mode. My husband jokes like, you never do anything the easy way. And I'm like, honey, it's because I can't. So I think there are gifts in there where we find new ways to do things, not because we want to, but because we have to. But then we get to share them with everybody else.
No. What is the last thing that truly surprised you?
Okay, the first thing that came to mind was there was a Mission Impossible moment with a giant rat in my kitchen, and I had
No.
pulled
Oh.
through the sink, and I was trying to. I don't have any fear of animals. Spiders are another story. Terrified, but furry things I'm fine with. But this creature had managed to disappear and reemerge above my head on the tallest kitchen cabinet, and then it dive bombed me.
Oh, no, no, no. Lauren, that is like, I'm getting visceral reaction as you're sharing this now.
The ending, though, it ran into the laundry room. I opened a window. I know rats are really smart, so I built it a little ladder and it climbed out and went away.
Oh my gosh. I would have never in my life thought about, oh, they're smart. Let me build in a little ladder. Oh my gosh. Well, that's kind of a cute ending. I'm glad that it had a happy ending there. And I'm totally the person where, my husband, I get him to take care of all such things, but I'm like, don't kill it. Don't kill it. Even if it's just like you were saying, like a little spider or something, I'm like, don't kill it. I want to keep everything alive. So I'm glad that it did have a happy ending and he could just go up. But that dive bombing, oh, I would have freaked out. I would have been having nightmares about that for 3 months, talking it
It's
out.
the second time it jumped out at me in the same day. And my husband, bless him, he was working from home and his response time was on point. Like he ran when I screamed.
Oh man. Wow. All right. Well, last question. What consistently brings you deep joy?
Oh gosh. Okay. The consistently brings me deep joy. Like first credit has to go with just like peaceful, snuggly evenings with my husband and the dog and the cats on the couch and just being together. That's my happiest place. And my second happiest place is when I'm talking to my clients. And you've seen it on Loom. It's the same thing in all of my interactions. I always have the best time.
What a gift. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your hard-earned wisdom. And this has been such a fun episode for me as I was anticipating for it to be. It has totally delivered. I hope everyone has as much fun listening as I had, asking these questions and just being in your presence. And thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you. This was so much fun.